Portions of America First are brought to you in part by Young America's Foundation.
One of the most fun things I get to do on this show is to share with you things I found, things I enjoy. And one of them is a new podcast I'm sharing with you. It's by a bunch of Brits, some crazy guys who speak the truth. It's called Triggernometry with 2 G's. And we sat down with them, with Francis and with Konstantin, for a whole hour yesterday. And we're going to share with you a little clip about good things like patriotism. Here are the hosts of Triggernometry.
I'm really glad you bring up the issue of values and patriotism, Seb, because I think this is so important for people in the West to understand. And as someone who comes from outside, it's easier to see. I'm working on my first book, which will be called An Immigrant's Love Letter to the West.
Wow.
And this is really the point that I want to hit home. People need to understand in the West that what we have here is precious. It's rare, it's extremely difficult to maintain, and if we do not remember what our values are, and we don't speak up for them, if we don't protect them, if we're not patriotic in a healthy way, the West will die, like every great civilization before. And what comes in place of that is going to be China or Russia. Now, as someone who comes from Russia, I can tell you that's not a pleasant outcome. I know a lot of Chinese people. I promise you, if you care about, as people on the left claim to care about racism and, inequality and oppression, well, a world dominated by China, I'm not sure that's going to be less racist. I'm sorry, right? So we need to remember.
But the donuts aren't that good. The light cheese are better.
Yeah, bat donuts are probably not the best. But look, I think people in the West really need to understand that this is a civilizational issue. All this woke stuff, it's not just games. And I said this at the time when I turned down that contract in 2018. People were like, "Why do you care so much about these students sending you this contract?" And I was saying to them, 5-10 years from now, these are the idiots that are going to be running our country.
And they are. Well, one thing, 2 things that surprised me, and I'm going to repost that, guys. So if you're interested, the interview with Calvin Robertson, go to my Twitter feed, Seb Gorka, SEBGORKA. Look for us on Facebook, and we'll repost it. Please watch it. It's superlative. 2 things, guys. Seriously, the BBC? You think it's salvageable? Come on, wake up and smell the coffee grinds. And secondly, KK, the whole statues issue. You were so open to this idea that we can have a discussion, we can negotiate about whether statues stay. Let me give you a piece of advice I learned from somebody else. You never negotiate with Marxists, and that's who these people are. That's my contribution.
Who gave you that advice?
I'm trying to think now. I'm trying to think now. Somebody who had a personal experience, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Well, look, the BBC, maybe Francis can talk about it. The statues is the one that you brought up with me. Look, the point of our show is to be open-minded and to listen to different points of view. So I will always be keen to explore those. I'll make up my own mind at the end of it. I don't think people should go around tearing things down that they don't like. Do I think that people who were, whose main thing was that they were slave traders should be up in our cities? Well, I think that should be a democratic decision. If the people of, in our case, Bristol want to vote to not have that statue, I grew up in Bristol. If they want to vote to have it removed, I don't have a big problem with that.
But is that how we got here?
No.
That, there was a referendum in Bristol on statues? No, it was a bunch of freaking Marxist crazies, right?
Yeah, there was actually a vote in Bristol, and they voted to keep the statue. So,
no, but I mean at the beginning, right? When it begins, it's just the people going there and putting red paint over Churchill's statue. It's not a
and I'm totally against that.
Right.
I'm totally against that. Right. I'm just look. We've got, Seb, the thing for us is, it's that Nietzsche quote, when you stare long enough into the abyss also stares into you.
Right.
All of us who are challenging this ridiculous stuff have got to remember not to become what we hate. And I think that's really important, to maintain our open-mindedness, to make sure that we listen to everybody. We take good ideas, even if they're suggested by people that we don't like, and we reject bad ideas, even when they're suggested by people that we like. I think that's very, very important. And I try to model that as best I can. I will always fail eventually.
That lovely note of Russian optimism. FF, BBC, salvageable.
Right. The problem is that whenever I'm confronted with this question, I immediately hark back to my childhood, the great comedies of the BBC, the wonderful documentaries it produces, David Attenborough, etc.
It's like ancient history. The two Ronnies. It's like ancient history.
Yeah. Yeah, and I have such affection for the quality of content that they used to produce.
Right.
The problem is now I think they've gone too far down a particular route, and not even with the content they produce, but with the people that they hire. They tend to be, university educated. They tend to be very liberal, very metropolitan, very pro-Remain, etc., etc. So, and the problem is when you get a certain type of person, you create essentially a large echo chamber.
Yeah.
And at that point, they can't see somebody else's point of view. They can't understand why people think differently, and they're only going to produce a certain type of content. And at that moment, the content that they're producing is out of step with the vast majority of people, or the silent majority, as they're often known in this country.
The remarkable thing about everything we discussed is the similarities between the situation here in America and in the UK, the land of the indomitable bulldog spirit and the likes of Winston Churchill. I think it's not an accident that those two individuals who don't see themselves as conservatives, I'm talking about Francis Foster and Konstantin Kisin. Well, Francis's mother escaped from Venezuela, and Konstantin and his family escaped from the Soviet Union. That's why they see things so clearly. I'm a big fan. Watch the whole hour discussion on YouTube. We posted it yesterday. And do subscribe to their podcast. You won't regret it. It's called Triggernometry with 2 G's. That's Francis Foster and Konstantin Kisin. If you enjoy the long form, if you want even more long form, I'm back. He's back. John Batchelor. He calls it the new John Batchelor Show. He's now with CBS Radio, back on his old stations. I'll be with him tonight, 10 p.m. WRKO out of Boston. If you missed John, he's back in full force. This is America First with me, Sebastian Gorka, on the Salem Radio Network, coming to you from the ReliefFactor.com studio.